Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you've had a great Drupal GovCon. It's been different this year. We're not at NIH, obviously, but we've made it work, and it's been a good day. We're going to have some opening remarks from Ashley Miller at USDA to kick us off here.
Hey everyone, I'm trying to get my video to work and it's fighting me. All right, there I am. Hi, I'm Ashley Miller. I work at USDA and I am the former product owner for Farmers.gov. One of the major features on Farmers.gov is a series of interactive tools that guide farmers through the large number of complicated programs that USDA offers. While these tools are super easy to navigate, they use large amounts of content like fields, images, icons, copy. All of this content needs to be set up in the Drupal admin side for development, testing, and deployment to the final product. Our developers used Drupal's post-update function to roll out the content quickly and efficiently across environments. I'd like to introduce you to Matt Calvert, front-end developer, and Jason Glisson, Drupal developer, to walk you through how they successfully deployed hundreds of pieces of content in seconds for Farmers.gov.
All right, thanks so much, Ashley. So we've got a lot to cover. We're going to be doing a demo as well, so we're just going to jump right into it. So we wanted to cover the actual problem that we encountered and why we took this approach. First, we had a lot of content that we had to deploy, and by a lot, I mean hundreds and hundreds of individual fields had to be filled out. It had to be done quickly. We also were not able to schedule downtime or off hours to load this content in, which was a problem because it was a potential hours of downtime that it would have taken to get this application set up. A big one for us is that we don't have access to some of our environments, mainly production. Someone else manages that on the USDA side, and it's a pain point for most of the time during our project. But we've been able to find ways to work with them and work around that issue. And lastly, copying a database up from the lower environments is just a general bad practice. And so we wanted to avoid that as well. So going back to one of the things that we encounter going back to that issue is we needed to be able to roll this content out to multiple environments. And all of our developers work locally, but we also have development environment. We have a QA environment, staging environment, and then we have a production environment. We also had a separate environment that was specific to the design system that we were working on. And that caused a problem having to roll out all this content between each one of these environments with that many fields and that much data. It would have just taken an enormous amount of time to get it all loaded on individual environments. So one of the things that, and I want to just real quick, I don't know if he's on this call, but I want to give a shout out to Steve Patz, because this is really something that he mentioned to us when we kind of figured out this is going to be a problem, rolling out this much content on so many different environments, and then lastly to production. And he mentioned, well, maybe we could do something with an update script. And so that's how this really got started. And then we realized this is really going to end up making things easy for us. It's going to help with content. And what I mean by that is we have content curators on our side, but their job is not really to copy and paste stuff into Drupal. It is to write and edit content and curate their content. So one of the things that we wanted to say is let them do their job. Their job is not to be entering in all the content, and it would have taken, pretty much all hands on deck type situation for all of us to enter the content anyway. So it was impossible to do with just one person. Synchronizing all of our content across all the environments was a big deal. So this helped us with that. and then lastly, launching this particular application, we were able to just launch it within seconds, which was great for us. So one thing that I wanted to cover is the difference between a regular update, which is incremented with numbers, and I think most of the developers have probably seen that before, used it. And then we have the post-update hook, which surprisingly, there's really not that much documentation online. And we found out some things here and there that we didn't know and weren't really documented anywhere. So first off, with the regular update, that is it's really used to update database schemas. The Drupal API is not really available using that. The site isn't bootstrapped. You can't use any kind of creation functions to create entities or fields or any kind of views or anything like that. You have to increment that name, the function name, up by with numbers like 8001, 8002. I'm sure most of the developers have seen that. You can use it for creating, reading, updating, and deleting. But again, all the APIs for Drupal are not available. And like I mentioned, it's really ideal for just updating the database schema. So for post updates, those post updates run right after the regular update hooks. All of the Drupal APIs are available, so you can pretty much create anything you want to with it. And you can name them just about anything as long as you use your module name, post update, and then underscore kind of anything you want. We'll look at that in a little bit. You are able to do something very similar with install scripts. And if you've ever written an install script for a module, it works very similar. But we thought that maybe that wasn't ideal. Really, we're not installing anything with this module. We're also not preparing anything to be uninstalled when we want to remove the module. And that's really kind of what the install hook is for. It's really specific to something that you're setting up for this module, mainly database schemas, and something that you're going to be uninstalling when you want to remove this module. So that wasn't really something that we wanted to look into either. Let's see. I think
this is me.
Matt.
All right. Do you want to unshare?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about actually writing the script. Just want to make sure you can see my slide here before writing your script. We good?
You're good.
Okay. So some of the things you want to consider before you start writing your script, as Jason said, we don't have access to the Drupal API, so you're not able to create, or at least you're not able to until after the first hook update runs. You will need to create your content or paragraph types, any fields that you need, etc. You need to set those up on the back end yourself, and you want to make sure that you export that to your configuration if there's any custom stuff that you need to do. And that's because as you go to your as you push it to your other environments, you want to make sure that those are there and created so that your update script does what it needs to do. The other thing you need to consider is the order that you're going to be entering in your data, your content. That's important because, as you can see, we have a numbered list here for how we're doing it, how we did it for the tool. Specifically, point number 4 is we're adding taxonomy terms to a paragraph field. Well, if we just create the paragraph and we haven't created the terms yet, that's not going to work. So we need to make sure we create the terms first, then the paragraph, so then we can add the terms to the paragraph field. By the same token, you want to create the page because we're going to be appending the pages, we're going to be appending the paragraphs to that page, and then we're going to save it. So, there we go. Setting up the script in your module. So in order for Drupal to be able to run it, you need to make sure your post update script is inside of the module, and it has to follow a specific naming convention. And you can see that one, this first one here, the file name. Module name is the name of your module, and then post_update.php, the rest of that you have to have there. Otherwise, when you go to run it, again, Drupal's not going to run it. By the same token, the functions need to follow a naming convention as well. And again, you have module name, and any of the functions have to be in this format. The name at the end, where it's all caps, that can be any name you want. So you can have multiple names with underscores, rather multiple words with underscores. That'd be fine. The one thing that you need to be aware of, though, is that when you put these in a script, Drupal will run those, and we found it the hard way because we couldn't figure out what was going on, and then we figured out that Drupal likes to run these functions in alphabetical order. So if you have ABC in a function and another one called DEF, DEF is going to run second no matter where you put it. If you put it at the top of the script, it's still going to be second. And that was kind of important for that previous slide because, for example, if you had a function ended with terms and you had another function whose name ended with paragraphs, well, the paragraphs are going to run first and you don't have the terms ready. So you're not going to, it's not going to work that way. So two ways that you can go about it. You either make sure that all of your functions are alphabetically in the order that you want them to run. The other thing that we've done, and you'll see this when we get to the demo, you have your function that has the right name on it, it has the right naming convention, and then you have other functions that don't. So those won't run, but you call those from your main function. So then you can reorder those however you like. And I won't go too much into that because we have it in the example. If you're confused, we'll see that later. So you have your script set up. It's in the module. You want to be able to run it now. There's two ways of doing that. You can go to the command line and you can run a drush updb. And what that will do, besides all the other things it does, it will go through the modules. And if it finds a post update script that has functions that haven't been run, it will run those functions. And the same thing happens. You can also, if you don't have access to the command line, you can also go to your website and you add update.php to your website, and you have to have admin access to in order to run that. So not just anybody can do it, but that will give you a nice web interface that you can use, and you can do the same thing where you go ahead and tell it to run any update scripts that you need. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some code samples, and again, this is detailing the order in which we create things. And we're going to start. First thing we want to do is, excuse me one sec. First thing we want to do is we want to create the vocabulary. And in our demo, we're going to create a taxonomy vocabulary. Actually, I'm sorry, in the demo, we've already done it. But if you don't have it, you can automatically create it. But in this case, it is called Drupal GovCon. And for the example, here's an example of code that we have. And you can see we start off, we log that the vocabulary is being created so that we know we have a record that, yes, this ran. And then what we do, we need to give it a machine name, in this case, Drupal GovCon. And we're giving it a display name, also Drupal GovCon with spaces. The next thing we're doing is we're grabbing all of the vocabularies that Drupal has. And the reason why we're doing that is we don't want to recreate this again. So we look at using the ID, we check the vocabularies, and if it doesn't exist, we go ahead, we create the vocabulary, and then we're adding a field to it, an image to it. And so here we set our field array, which is a very long array. We're only doing one field for this one right now, but there's a lot there. So we go ahead and we set that up, and then we loop through it in case we have more than one. It will go through, it will load that field up. If the field is empty, it will go ahead and insert that information into it. In this case, the image. And then when it's done, it saves the vocabulary. And then we're going to go on to the next step, which is we want to add our taxonomy terms to the vocabulary. So we're going to go ahead and create those. We're going to add some text, and we're going to upload an image for the taxonomy terms. This example is a little bit different. Again, we're still logging that we've run it. Now we have a function, and I'll get to that in a moment because we're going to call that later down in the script. You set the module path. We set where the images are because it needs to know where the images are located in order for it to add it. And then we're saying what the vocabulary ID, the machine name for it that we had set in the previous script. Here, now we set up our data array, and this is where the function is going to come into play. This makes it look much nicer than, for example, doing this. If you end up doing something like this, where you're setting the array, you're just copying and pasting it multiple times in the script, that gets a little long, kind of hard to update your data after a while. This is much nicer if you need to update any content. So we loop through it. We're passing the information to the function that we have at the top here. We're passing the image. We're passing the field name of the image. And then we're passing the array that matches the data structure. Now, this could go in the function if you want it to. The reason why we didn't do it is that the taxonomy terms, sometimes that structure is different. So we just pass the full array so we can change it and still use the same function, which is this one at the top. So we go ahead and we upload the image. And then once that's done, we add the ID and the alt name for the image. We add that to the data. And then we go ahead and we save the term, the taxonomy term. So we're done with that. Our next step is that we're going to create the page. And then we're going to create all of our paragraphs, attach the paragraphs to the page, and then save the page. And that will be our final step. So for the paragraph example, we have, just a second, there we go. We actually have two functions here. I'll explain those in a second. And here, this is much easier, much less code. We've got, we create the page, we add a title to it, and we set it. And again, we set our data array and we loop over it down here. And we're calling the function up here. So what this function does, will go ahead and fill out all of the information for the paragraph type. And what we're doing here, it's calling this other second function. And the reason why it's doing that, we're saying load the term ID by name. The reason why we're doing that is because this all gets run at one time. And when you're creating your taxonomy terms, we're not able to just pass the ID along to another function. So we're just going by the name of the term. This function then takes the name. So in our data, this would be the name. And then that's the machine name of the vocabulary that we want to look into. So this function uses those two pieces of data, looks it up and gets you the term ID, and returns it so that we can save it and attach the taxonomy term to the paragraph. We save the paragraph, and then when that's done, we attach it to the field paragraphs field that's in the page. And so we've looped through all of those, and it's after we've gone ahead and we've appended all of those paragraphs to the page, we go ahead and we publish the page. You know, the status, you could set it to, I think, 0s for draft if you don't want to publish it. You don't have to directly publish it. So that's the quick example of how we do that. And now Jason is going to show us a demo of it actually working.
I'm going to definitely try to.
Okay.
Let's see. I don't remember the best way that I did this earlier, but I've got so much that I'm going to show. Let me see if I can show this one desktop here. Okay. All right. Are you seeing, what are you seeing right now?
I see the demo of the post update script.
Great. Okay. So we're using Lando, or I'm using Lando locally to run this. And we have this entire demo and all of the examples that Matt showed in a Git repo. I wasn't aware that Git had its own link shortener, but apparently they do, or GitHub does. So you can follow that. All of the examples are there. I think there's also configuration in that repo that will get you some of the fields, paragraph types, and I think the one vocabulary that instead of creating it in the actual script, we've got it in config. And I do want to mention that one thing that we did for this tool that we rolled out, actually there were multiple tools we've used this on at this point, I think 3 or 4. But we would actually put up most of our fields that we knew we were going to need, paragraph types and vocabularies. We would put that in configuration because it was just a lot easier to go ahead and do that and get it in code, and it makes the script run a lot faster as well. So what we're going to do in this demo is we're going to add taxonomy terms to the vocabulary. Within each one of those terms, we're going to add data, we're going to upload an image, and then we're going to create paragraphs and add data to that. We're also going to append a taxonomy term to a reference field inside that paragraph. We're going to create the page, and then we're going to append the paragraphs to that page and then save it all. Are you still seeing my screen? You see the site demo?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, great. So this is the content, just the content list for the site. There's nothing there. I'll refresh just so you can see there's nothing up my sleeve. And I ran this yesterday and my computer was running really slow, and now it's running slow again. Okay, so there's no content here. This is the one vocabulary that we've made, just called Drupal GovCon, and like Matt mentioned, the machine name, we use that in the script just to kind of target the vocabulary. And you can do loops and things and target multiple ones if you needed to. It just really depends on how your data is structured. And we had some very complex data layouts where we had paragraphs that had nested date fields and things like that. It got really complex, but we were able to work it all out just through some trial and error. We also have just the one paragraph type. Again, you can make that in your script if you wanted to, just using standard Drupal API hooks, but we've gone ahead and put that in configuration. So then in during your deployment, we did this deployment back and forth, and I'll get into this in just a minute, but we did it back and forth between our development server quite a bit, just testing. So really all you have to do, and because I'm using Lando, I have to use the prefix Lando. And I'm going to do drush updb, which is how you normally run a database update. And I'm aware that I have a update available, but I actually had to roll this back because I was having some composer issues. So we're just going to go with it like it is. But what I want to show you is that this particular update script will run in kind of the middle of all of these other updates that are also having to execute. Okay, so we have some system updates. We have a path module update. We have some other ones, but you see right here, we've got this post-update demo. And that's just going to run our post-update script. So I'm just going to hit yes. And hopefully this doesn't take too long. But since there are so many other things, it might take just a minute. Oh, that didn't take long at all. So you can see it's going through the updates. And like Matt mentioned, I don't know if you've gotten to this yet or not, but he will, that you can actually do this through the UI if you have admin rights. It does show up in the UI as an update as well.
Yeah, I had mentioned that. That was the update.php script.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. It's pretty much already done it. Okay, there it goes. Cleared cache and it's done. So I'm going to refresh this page and we'll see some content there. I'll also refresh the taxonomy term list and we'll see some content there as well. Okay, so now we have 3 terms. And we have a demo page. Boy, that seems very magical when that happens, when it works right. All right, so we have paragraphs, and like I mentioned, we were going to have a reference taxonomy term reference field in those paragraphs. And if you can imagine, the way we use this to really launch a series of decoupled applications where we used a page, essentially like this, to manage all of the data that was going into this application. And within the module that we created our own endpoint rather than using services or anything like that. It's only a one-way street. We weren't exchanging data. So we created our own JSON endpoint within this module. So as soon as this information and all the content gets loaded into this page, it's immediately available through this endpoint to the view app part of this module. So really, we're just using the backend part to manage the content for the application. So this is a, let's see, let me get to the actual update script. So this is the actual script we ran just now. And again, this is available in GitHub if you want it or want to look at it.
Point out what I was talking about earlier.
Sure, yeah.
The functions.
Yeah, this is exactly what Matt was talking about here, where we got around the issue of the naming convention running in alphabetical order by just having one function. I think you're the one that discovered that, Matt, that like things are really running out of order.
Yeah, I
so
did.
this is how we got around that. Yeah. And you can just stack things in the order that they need to run. Yeah, we didn't create the vocabulary, but what I want to point out here is that it looked to see if it was already exist in the site, and it didn't need to do anything, so it moved on. Here we loaded all of our taxonomy terms. You can see the array right here. Loaded those in, and then saved them to this machine name. So it looked up that vocabulary and added these terms to it. And it also updated or uploaded those images. I guess when you do it that way, sometimes it won't give you a preview. I can click into one of these and just show you that it uploaded it. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't give you a preview there, but you can see the images there. And it also sometimes puts it in the kind of the wrong order. You could probably mess around with the order of the fields being listed in the actual UI, but we haven't done that. That's really just a problem for taxonomy terms. It's not really a problem for anything else. Let's see. So then we've got all of our terms. It loops through those, adds those. Then we are creating our paragraphs. And I want to point out this is the way that we're adding those. You're going to append all of the paragraphs to this paragraph field. This is really an entity reference field where you're just adding things to it. You're adding paragraphs to it. And then this is the array with all of the individual paragraph information in it. We've got our page name. It's going to set the title, and then down here you've got it looping through those paragraphs and adding them to the page, and then lastly you're saving it. So it does a lot, does it very quickly, and if you can imagine having a similar script, a very, very long script. I don't remember, it was probably like between 7,000 and 8,000 lines long, but it was all the content for this tool, and it executing that fast where you don't have to do anything in the UI as far as copy and paste. It's extremely useful. This is really kind of explaining our development cycle using this. We work locally and deploy to our development environment often, just kind of back and forth between local and dev, because we had control of our development environment. I imagine if you don't have control of it, if a federal agency is managing it for you, that could be a problem. But really, we just went back and forth between the development and local environment quite a bit until we had a working script. when we pushed to QA, I think maybe we only executed the script maybe twice. Once on QA to kind of get the fields on there, make sure they all showed up properly, and then again to get all the content there. We didn't spend any time at that point QAing the script because it's kind of a one-shot deal. Either it's going to work or it's not going to work. And by then, after really testing and developing this script, you're going to know whether or not it's going to work or not by the time you get it deployed to a QA environment. Once we get to staging, that's really used for client sign off on content, and that's it really. Maybe making sure some edits get through, and then lastly, deploying to production. Once you get to that point, most of the time, if there's like a tweak to content or anything, it's much easier to just go ahead and deploy and then do it right in the UI as soon as it's deployed. And that's what we've done on a number of tools that we've launched, where there is a sentence that needs correcting, or even a comma that needs to be removed or something. Once it's deployed, it can be just edited in the UI like anything else.
Okay, so there was actually a question in chat about it, that if you run DrushUpDB again, is it going to do the updates again? The answer is no. Once the post-update script is run, it records the functions that were run. Drupal will do that, and if you run it again, it's not going to re-import your content. But however, when you're developing it, of course, you're going to want to rerun that a few times to make sure you're entering in the content correctly, fixing bugs, what have you. So here we have a way that you can do it. In your lower environments, you do not want to do this in production, and I'll tell you why in a second. But in your lower environments, from the command line, you can run a drush command that essentially is running a PHP snippet. And you run this whole thing, all those lines, you take all those lines, paste them into the command line, run it all at once. It's not individual lines. The module name, post update name in bold, that's the name of the function that you want to reset. So if you have more than one function in this, named this way in the naming convention for Drupal, you're gonna have to run this more than once, which is probably why a good argument for only having one function like we had, because then you only have to run this command once. The reason this doing this on production, completely done and it's the way you want it, you're only going to want to run it once. The other reason, as you can see here, is that if you have content already there, it is going to duplicate your content. And in our case, it would actually break the tool that we're working on. There are a couple ways that you can take care of that. If you have a paragraph type, we have again, you do a drush PHP eval command, and you type in the machine name of the paragraph type, and this command will delete all of those paragraphs. Now, in our case, there was a lot of different paragraph types, a lot of taxonomy terms I'd have to remove each time. So rather than trying to manually delete everything, I would actually, what I like to call the scorched earth method. I went ahead and I just would back up my database before I ran the script. And if I needed to run it again, I would delete my database and re-import, which takes a little bit more time, but for me, that worked better because I was ensured that I would have a fresh copy of the database and there wouldn't be any stragglers of something that I might have missed when I run it again. And then I think that's, yeah, next slide. I think that's you, Jason. Yep.
Okay, so someone actually asked in the chat, is this similar to some migrate functionality? And that's a good question. I think you could probably do most, if not all, of this with the migrate API. I guess I don't really know that there would be much of a difference. I think the post update script structure at least would be similar to the migrate API, and let's see. Yep. Migrate rollback is one thing someone just mentioned, so that, yeah. So as far as pros and cons to the update script, there are some of both that we wanted to cover. And a lot of these we've mentioned already, but I want to just have it in one slide so everyone understood. It is very quick to deploy large amounts of content. The most recent tool that we rolled out was probably one of the largest ones, but we've had tools that deployed, gosh, maybe 6 to 10 pages, and each one of those pages had, you know, dozens and dozens of paragraphs and different fields, images that needed to be uploaded, PDFs, all kinds of things, and having that done quickly within just a few seconds is great. The con to that is that you are going to spend some significant time writing the script. And you know, if you're not familiar with the Drupal API, you're going to be by the time you're done with writing this script. It's a simple command to execute. And we like that because when we hand off our deployments to whatever federal agency we're working with, sometimes you have someone that's got some Drupal expertise on that end. Sometimes you don't. And in our case, oftentimes we'd have to write up instructions on do step A, B, and C, and don't do them in out of order. You have to do them in that order. So being able to just tell them run your typical Drush updb rather than doing anything else as far as like a custom Drush command or anything. Yeah, it makes it much easier. Again, like I mentioned, you got to be familiar with the Drupal API. It's very flexible. You can do pretty much anything you want to do through the UI. You can do this way. And I mentioned this earlier. It's really supposed to be kind of a one-shot deal. Matt mentioned, you know, running those scripts, and you can roll the script back and redo it. There was one time where we had to do that on a particular environment, a higher up environment. But for the most part, you know, all of our deployments have been extremely solid using this method. And once it's run in production, we don't worry about it anymore. It's done. The fields are there, and you know, everyone can just edit in the UI from then on out. It's really useful to deploy that exact same content through multiple environments, because the hours you're going to spend spending time copying and pasting all of that content over and over and over again, it's going to be a lot, especially with some of these larger applications. If you're developing those, it's going to take a lot of time. And then also what Matt mentioned is you have to be careful. You don't want someone that really doesn't know what they're doing running some of these PHP scripts and removing that update script from your database and then running it again, because it will duplicate your content. So you have to be really careful about that. But for the most part, you know, I think I don't know that anyone actually did any of that in any of our higher environments, but that's just something that we wanted to put as a caution. Okay, so the problems that this solved for us, the agency office that's in charge of our deployments routinely ran Drush updb as well as configuration imports. So they were familiar with, you know, those two commands. So this wasn't anything kind of, you know, different for them as far as deployments, and it ran extremely fast. And that alone really is just kind of the selling point of doing it this way, just the speed and how easy it is. We weren't able to schedule any deployments kind of off peak times. You know, I've done deployments for other agencies at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. It just wasn't something we could do with this particular deployment or agency. So it's kind of in the middle of the day or whenever they get around to it. So, you know, that wasn't a problem doing it this way. I think most of our team is very grateful. I can think of a couple in particular that are very grateful that they didn't have to spend hours copying and pasting from a Word doc into Drupal. So, you know, it's great. You're going to save everyone on your team time doing it this way. And we were able to pinpoint an exact launch time. So if we say we're going to launch this tool at 4 p.m., you know, even though there's hundreds of, you know, individual pieces of content, dozens of PDFs, it's going to launch pretty close to that time. You know, we can say at 4 p.m. we're going to start launching the tool, and at, you know, 4:01 or 4:02, it's probably going to be done. And then lastly, I've said it over and over, tons of hours were saved doing it this way. And I can't overstate that before this, we had several tools that we were working on. Some actually had content that wasn't even in the UI because of the speed that we were having to develop these things. We had to go back and redo the UI, which we're actually going to be talking tomorrow about one of our tools that we had to do that. So this just saved a ton of time being able to roll out a tool, both kind of the entire front end application and all of the content, all kind of in one shot. And that's it. I think there's probably a lot of questions and things in the chat. And since I'm hosting, let me kind of scroll back and see what
there was
questions.
one I saw that asked how do you handle sensitive data with this approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think in terms of sensitive data, it would probably be something we wouldn't even put in the script. If it's going to be something like social security numbers or something like that, we probably would not be storing that in a repo. That would probably, we'd probably have to find a different way of doing that particular piece of data, or we would have to do it by hand. So that's a good question. I don't know that we ever came across any sensitive data that we've done this with, but I imagine we would have to figure out another way to do it.
Was there a conscious choice to not use migrate for this?
No, I don't know that I don't know that we ever really thought about using migrate, although that it would have been pretty much the same method, I guess, doing it that way. And I imagine kind of the same structure to the script as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just so for background, I built for Drupal 7 hook, update, deploy tools for doing a lot of stuff on updates, but I also do a lot of migrate work, and my recommendation would be use migrate for this because it's got most of those tools built in as far as like setting dependencies, like taxonomies have to run first,
Right.
then this, then that. You know, it's built on the migrate API that's in core. But the biggest thing is rollback. You know, you could roll back any of the things that you built in this script. You can do one command, one drush command, roll it back. All that content disappears. You can try the migration again, and continuous migration. So if you added content that you suddenly wanted to roll out, you're just adding it to the source. Migrate already keeps track of what it's migrated and what it hasn't. It's just a lot more powerful and a lot more safe, I guess, is the
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. I think for one thing is that the speed that we were moving to get some of this done, we didn't really have a whole lot of time to experiment. We had to find a solution immediately, and I think like a couple of week turnaround for one tool, and then the content is growing so fast while we're actually working on this stuff as well. It worked, and we kind of figured out a pretty good formula, so we just kind of kept going with it. It was really, I guess, the answer to that.
Makes sense. We got to build as we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there are any other questions. I think that might be it. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We certainly appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Hopefully you'll stay tuned till tomorrow and join Drupal GovCon again. There's going to be lots of other sessions. So thanks so much.